The cavernous hall was aglow with candles that seemed to hover in mid-air. Their flames reflected 100-fold in the still black water, filling the floor of the house of black and white. The ripples that accompanied each silent footstep broke those reflections into shards of gold and ghostly blue. Tonight, the hall smelled faintly of cedar and brine, a sign that the god was listening. A lone figure in a robe, the color of old ashes, knelt before the rippling pool. Head bowed so deeply the cowl all but brushed the water. When the kindly man's footsteps echoed behind him, soft, deliberate, yet impossible to mistake, he did not rise. Instead he waited, spine straight, eyes shut, listening to the water tap against the marble lip. "A girl hears," the kindly man said, voice mild as a prayer. "A life is promised." The kneeling figure raised an ink-stained palm. The parchment between thumb and forefinger was no larger than a playing card, yet its wax seal bore the imprint of a mockingbird in flight. Even upside down, the bird's wings looked greedy, grasping, sly. A name? Petir Baelish. A heartbeat passed while the water lapped. Then the parchment vanished, swallowed by the kindly man's sleeve. "A name has been given," he intoned. "The price has been met in full measure. Then a life shall be ended, and a new face earned." When the kneeling figure finally looked up, his eyes were two chips of iron slowly warming in a forge. They held no triumph, no joy, only a deadly readiness. Outside, Bravos slept beneath a moon thin as a smile, but within the house of black and white, the candles flared higher, as though the many-faced god itself inhaled. And so the contract was sealed. In Nenta, gray morning fog hung over the Ragman's harbor like wet wool when Jack and Hagar, though that was only one of 1,000 names he might wear, stepped onto the deck of the River Maiden. Bravos dwindled behind him, its myriad bridges muted and vague in the mist. The Titan's raised sword swallowed in cloud. He did not glance back. Sailors bustled, curses flew. Gulls cried for scraps. Jaqen leaned on the rail, feeling the ship's timbers creak beneath the restless sea. Westeros lay 8 days away if the winds held. He would spend them in a hammock above the bilge, snoring softly, a Taroshi diasman bound for King's Landing to hawk purple powder. His hair, streaked a lurid shade of indigo, hung to his shoulders in greasy ropes. At night he practiced a grin that was equal parts apology and avarice. The grin fit the false beard well. Each dawn he traced the mockingbird on the underside of his wrist. Ink only, yet it reminded him of the seal he had burned to ash. A mockingbird liked to perch high, to watch other birds dance for crumbs. But sometimes birds forgot that the sky bred hunters too. When the wind shifted 3 days out, storms slammed the River Maiden without mercy. Jaqen weathered them in silence, one brown eye half-lidded, as if seasick. In truth, he counted the moments by heartbeats, mapping future steps across a capital he had never walked. He tasted the scent of rain on every gust, and named each droplet an alleyway, each crack of thunder a hidden doorway. By the time the storm abated, he possessed the city in his mind, the way a master armorer holds a blade unfinished yet inevitable. The Red Keep's walls shone crimson under the afternoon sun, but Petir Baelish preferred the shade. His litter set him down in the quiet yard behind the Tower of the Hand, where acacia trees cast lacework shadows on gravel. Petir paused to savor the hush. Bird song, distant hammers from the armory, the soft rush of river air threading the city's sting. He adored such moments, too tranquil by half, ripe for plucking. Butterflies flitted among lavender. Petir caught one between thumb and forefinger. Its wings beat frantically against his skin. "Gentle, my lord," said the maidservant who had been trimming dead blooms. Her freckles were dusted with pollen. "Why be gentle?" Petir replied, smiling as sweetly as honeyed wine. "We are all butterflies. We dance a few heartbeats, think ourselves colorful, then are pinned to someone's collection." He let the creature go. It spiraled upward, one wing torn in his grasp, then careened drunkenly into the lavender again. Petir watched it falter, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He turned for the stair, mind already on the council session to come. Lord Stark's stubborn northern scruples, Varys' silky insinuations, Renly sniffing after gossip like a perfumed hound. And somewhere amid their noise would be Baelish's own tune. Soft, insinuating, deadly. He did not know a shadow had crossed the narrow sea to silence it. Memdad. King's Landing greeted the river maiden with damp heat and the rank stench of fish guts. Yakin Har, now Oliver the Tyroshi, paid the harbor master 3 small silver stags, slipped a copper to a starving boy for directions, and vanished into the alleys near Cobbler's Square. By dusk he wore the grime of the city like a second skin, purple dye bleeding from his scalp in greasy rivulets. Perfect. He rented a corner stall in a spice cellar beneath a scribe's shop, arranging jars of powdered clothidae in neat pyramids. Each customer saw a humble foreigner with poor common tongue, eager for coin. Yet every greeting, every haggled price, taught him a new inflection, a new slang. Language was a mask as elegant as any he could don. At night, he prowled Flea Bottom. Rats skittered over his boots as he slipped through taverns thick with smoke and lies. He drank the local ale, thin as soup, and listened. Gold cloaks bragged of whores and bribes. Butchers cursed taxes. Minstrels traded songs for bread. And through it all, the same small name fluttered like ash on the wind. Littlefinger. Littlefinger lent coin. Littlefinger whispered in the queen's ear. Littlefinger could make or unmake a smuggler with a word. In Flea Bottom they said he had eyes everywhere. Yakin smiled at that. Everywhere, perhaps. But not yet on the man who watched from the doorway, silent as a knot of dusk. Now, Winterfell felt far away to Lord Eddard Stark, though the raven's wings had carried his letters in 3 quick hops. The south smelled of rot and roses. The sun baked stone until the air shimmered. Some nights he dreamed of snow, woke to sweat, and cursed silently. Yet duty chained him here, and duty was a heavier burden than any snowpack. On the council, Daily Baelish lounged like a cat, legs crossed, fingers steepled. Varys fluttered beside him in robes of dusky lilac, eyes half-lidded. Grand Master Pycelle dozed until Renly coughed politely to wake him. None of them seemed troubled that Robert Baratheon had skipped the meeting again. Ned ground his teeth. "We must speak of coin," Baelish began, voice smooth as the Myrish silk that lined his sleeves. "War costs more each day. Even peace, such as we have, grows expensive." Ned eyed the man's slight frame, the mockingbird pin winking on his doublet. He saw quicksilver wit, greed, cold ambition barely veiled. But murder? Ned doubted Baelish would soil his own hands. "We sell the small folks' futures with each borrowed stag," Ned said. "Then best find richer buyers," Baelish answered. "I sell promises daily, my lord. The realm still honors them." Varys cleared his throat like a woman smoothing a gown. "And yet whispers reach even my humble little birds that creditors grow wary. They mutter of usurious interest. Default." Baelish spread his hands. "Whispers seldom know the numbers as I do." Ned stared at the accounts unrolled before him. Inked columns told a tale worse than whispers. Yet while he argued, a man in a purple-streaked wig sold dyes to a seamstress outside the palace gates. "Diaber." Sansa Stark walked the Maiden Vault gallery, trailing fingertips along a painted balustrade. She should have felt safe. Guards stood at either end, and her septa hovered near the doorway. Yet a presentiment crawled her skin. She glanced behind. A Tyroshi merchant knelt by the tapestries, fussing with a dropped box. Strange that he was allowed this far within, she thought. He looked up, smiled shyly. His beard was ragged, eyes mild. Sansa smiled in return, polite but distant as courtesy required. The merchant tucked his box into a satchel and bowed. When he straightened, she was already drifting deeper into the hall, sending her thoughts dancing toward her imagined future. Queen Sansa, adored by all. She did not see the dark satisfaction flicker across his face before it vanished behind meekness again. A girl has blue eyes, he mused, but her song is for another day. Nandara. 3 nights after the full moon, Littlefinger left Shataya's brothel by the postern gate, hood drawn low. The cobbles glistened with drizzle. A drunk sang in the next alley. Baelish stepped over a puddle, careful of his velvet boots, and never sensed the figure untethering from the shadows to follow at a measured distance. Around one bend, the gutters overflowed. Baelish muttered a curse and knelt to tug a splintered wooden board aside, easing the flow. The moment bent his spine, his neck. Had the faceless man acted then, a single thrust would have ended the song. But death at the wrong hour could raise alarms. A sparrow must think itself safe before jaws closed. So Yakin watched, motionless, cataloging the twitch of Baelish's cloak. The rhythm of his breath, the cadence of his soft swearing. Killers succeed where they make a study of patience. He tailed Baelish to the private door of a modest townhouse purchased under a cousin's name. When lamplight filled the pane, Yakin marked windows, counted steps to the river, timed the patrol of a lone gold cloak, 2 corners distant. Then he melted into the drizzle. At dawn, the mockingbird met the spider. Varys's chambers smelled of lilac and parchment. Perfumed candles fought valiantly against the perfume of secrets. "You wish to hear a song, Lord Baelish?" Varys cooed. "One of your darker ballads, if you please," Petty replied, swirling wine. "Shadows stir and flee bottom," Varys began. "A Taroshi peddler who is no peddler. A beggar who never begs, a bravo who never draws." Baelish's brows rose. "How poetic. How wearisome. Tell me why." "Because his questions are threaded to your name, my lord. Some wonder who paid him to pry." Baelish set the goblet aside, lips pursed. "A twist of coincidence. Yet you bring it to me." "Because coincidence seldom survives in King's Landing." Varys's laughter was thin. "I protect the realm. If an assassin stalks our streets, I should like to know whose coin fills his purse." Baelish tapped a finger on the tabletop. "An assassin or a curious fool. We cannot slit every curious throat." Varys inclined his bald head. "Some throats savor the blade more than others." Baelish showed his teeth. "Perhaps. If you find proof, whisper it in my ear. I pay well for certainty. Namsko. And I pay for truths yet unspoken," Varys murmured. "Be wary, Pettier. The capital is a stage where players die for forgetting their lines." As Baelish departed, he found himself studying every servant's face, every guardsman's stance. The butterflies had begun to tremble. Dumo. Yakinhar stood beneath the sign of the Moon Maiden, listening to rain drum on the eaves. Before him, Alabelli the turnkey snored over an unfinished tankard. The faceless man's cup remained untouched, though he had sat an hour mimicking intoxication, timing the swing of the tavern door, tasting the vigor of the storm. He watched 3 sellswards stagger to the privy yard. When they returned, he followed, boots silent in the slop. In the dim space behind barrels, he spoke 5 words in a dialect of Volantine Low Valyrian. Too quick for memory, yet the sellswards froze, mouths ajar. They had been men of the Black Ears once, deserters now. Their price for silence was 1 gold dragon each, or so they believed. Yakin paid in advance with a slender blade beneath a wine-flushed chin, then eased the bodies behind a midden. He slit the third man's purse, took the coin, and wiped the blade on the corpse cloak. Ashamed to waste gold after all. When he emerged, rain washed the alley clean. That night he returned to his cellar and dried the blade with care. The mockingbird upon his wrist seemed to preen, its ink feathers glossy in the lantern light. Yet he did not smile. The god accepts no delays, he reminded himself. Soon, very soon. Outside, bells tolled the hour. In the Red Keep, Baelish practiced courtly humor, charming a Tyrell cousin over cards, unaware of midnight footsteps shifting the weave of destinies. Across the city, Arya Stark chased cats beneath tunnels slick with slime. Her feet were bare, her hair a tangle of black cords. She slipped through a drain, jumped a broken arch, and skidded to a halt before the open maw of a culvert where torchlight flickered. 2 men spoke inside, one gruff, one musical. Arya held her breath. "The hand digs too deep," said the gruff voice. "Better a quiet fall than a loud trial." "An accident upon the city walls, perhaps," sang the other. "Or a hunting mishap. Antlers are sharp." Arya's pulse thudded. She pressed deeper into shadow. The voices dwindled, their owners moved on. But she etched every word in memory. Later she would try to tell her father, fail, be distracted by secrets of her own growth. Unseen behind her, a Taroshi peddler paused at the culvert mouth, eyes glimmering. Stark and Baelish, tangled threads in a single knot. Pull one, the other quivers. Knowledge too can pay a god's price. He left without a whisper, his presence as fleeting as rain upon stone. Nebuli? Pettier Baelish dreamed of the fingers that night, of gulls wheeling above jagged rocks, of his father's cracked knuckles, selecting oysters for market. He woke before dawn, heart racing. He rose, poured wine, then stared at the surface until his reflection wavered. The mockingbird pin lay on his bedside stand, its tiny opal eye catching candlelight. He fastened it to his doublet, but the metal felt heavier. He shook off the notion, rehearsed quips, dressed for the small council. When the corridor outside his chamber yawned empty, he paused. A breath of air brushed his nape, cold despite the southern warmth. He turned swiftly. Nothing but shadows. Still, a chill lingered. In the council chamber he laughed too loudly at Lord Renly's jest, gestured too broadly over parchment balances. Varys watched him with placid amusement. Ned Stark watched everyone. Under the table, Baelish's foot tapped, silent Morse for nerves. When the meeting broke, Grand Maester Pycelle detained him to ramble on about interest rates in Old Valyria. Baelish's patience frayed thread by thread. Finally, he slipped away through a back stair, intending to breathe free air, and nearly collided with the Taroshi merchant, balancing a tray of dye jars. "1,000 pardons, my lord," the man murmured, bowing head and shoulders. His hair had run purple streaks onto his collar. Baelish waved him off, annoyance masking relief. Harmless peddler. Yet as he walked on, he wondered why the man's accent seemed thinner than yesterday's. Behind him, the merchant watched, expression bland. His left sleeve bulged slightly where a dagger's sheath pressed against cloth. Soon the god whispered, "2 days later, a raven landed on the House of Black and White's tallest spire. Its message was brief. The prey grows wary. The god waits. Diurn Tordor. Pettier Baelish hunted for answers of his own. Spies reported dead men by the Moon Maiden Tavern, throats opened with a surgeon's grace. Others whispered of a faceless shadow buying poisons from apothecaries. Varys offered only airy platitudes. One dusk, Baelish summoned 4 cutthroats loyal to him alone. Gold bought them, fear kept them. He armed them with short-bladed dirks better suited for tight corridors. Then he walked the city as bait, swaggering along Pisswater Bend, through Cobbler's Lanes, across the Street of Steel. He laughed at horrors, tossed coin to beggars, never letting the cutthroats stray far. The faceless man followed unseen, weighing each alley, each rooftop. A kill made here might reveal his art too soon. A kill made there risked witness. So he stalked, patient as nightfall. Near the black-shuttered ruin of the Painted Tavern, Baelish paused beneath a leaning beam. The cutthroats fanned, eyes sharp. Jaqen slid along a rooftop above, silent as frost. He could drop, drive steel through skull, vanish before shouts rose. Yet one cutthroat stood precisely wrong. Angles broken. Alert, dot. Risk, dot. Delay, dot. He sheathed the dagger. Tomorrow, he promised the god. Nidawalan. Morning sky bled rose and gold across Blackwater Bay as Baelish dined seaside with Sir Dantos. Wine, oysters, tart fruit, court gossip sweet as cream. Beneath the wicker table, one of Baelish's men crouched, a blade in sleeve. From a neighboring stall, the Taroshi man pretended to haggle for mussels, eyes flicking in reflections on brass bowls. Wind shifted. Up coast, a bell tower chimed, carrying gull cries. Jaqen scented caution on the breeze. Something in Baelish's posture, a forced ease, fingers drumming wine glass, told him the game had tilted. He could abandon the chase, slink away, seek new vantage. But Bravos had sealed a contract. A faceless man could fail only in death. He turned to the fishmonger. "Best price for full catch, friend," he murmured. Coins clinked. He hoisted a basket of slippery silver bodies. Fish stank, masked steel scent well. He drifted nearer Baelish, humming off-key. The cutthroat beneath the table spotted him tensed. Jaqen slipped, sent fish scattering. Silver bodies flopped across Baelish's boots. Seawater splashed his velvet. "Seven hells!" Baelish cursed, leaping back. The crouching guard surged up, blade half-drawn, then faltered, dazed by the sudden slick underfoot. Jaqen's hand darted, one finger brushing the guard's wrist. A tiny needle prick delivered by a ring. Clear toxin seeped. The guard felt only a sting, turned to berate the clumsy merchant, then collapsed, convulsing. Chaos erupted. Jaqen melted with the panicked crowd, face lost among fisherfolk. Baelish shouted orders, yanking clear of dying man's thrash. Two other cutthroats dragged their comrade aside, eyes scanning for threat they could not name. The first kill, indirect, sowed fear. A lesson. Even guards could not shield him. Tomorrow the game would narrow. That night, a violet dusk draped the capital. Crows lined the rooftop of Baelish's townhouse, silent silhouettes against fading light. Inside, candles flickered in every corridor, though no servants moved about. Baelish dismissed them hours before, trusting no one. He paced his solar cloak swirling. On the other side of a shutter, a shadow clung. Listening, the townhouse smelled of beeswax and dread. Jaqen mapped boards that creaked beneath carpet, hinges that squealed. He waited as clouds swallowed the moon. Baelish's footsteps approached the bedchamber. A door clicked. Light flamed brighter, silhouetting him for one instant in perfumed gloom. Jaqen eased the shutter wide enough for a breath of night air. The needle-thin blade in his palm glinted, no longer than a splinter. One thrust at the base of the skull. Silent. Sure. Yet a log crashed in the hearth then. Sparks flared, dazzling. Baelish, startled, turned toward the window. His gaze met a figure cloaked in shadow. At last he saw death's face. Featureless, calm. He lunged for a bell cord. Jaqen flowed over the sill, feet silent. Baelish's hand closed on the cord, but too late. The blade kissed flesh behind his ear. Skin parted, blood a thin whisper. Yet Baelish twisted, cunning even in terror. The blade nicked bone, glanced off, slid across neck, not deep enough. Baelish screamed. Guards pounded below. Jaqen's second stroke was blocked by Baelish's arm, steel scraping velvet, slicing through muscle. Pain granted Baelish desperate strength. He hurled himself backward into a bookcase. Tomes rained. Jaqen stepped left, ready for finishing cut. Then froze. The mockingbird pin had torn free, tumbling through lamplight, landing between them. Its opal eye caught the firelight, a single blazing tear. The symbol of contract itself, mocking, defiant. Boots thundered on stairs. The window still gaped behind. Jaqen weighed heartbeats. Chosen God, oath unfulfilled. He snatched the pin instead of striking, sprang to the sill, vanished into darkness as armed men burst in. Baelish collapsed, hand clamped to bleeding neck, alive, shaking. Alive. Below, Jaqen blended with rain-slick streets, blood no more than perfume on wind. The mockingbird pin rested in his pocket, its tiny eye now dulled by shadow. Faceless man had failed. Only one price could balance such scales. Nemder his hunter. Dawn's first light found Jaqen atop the sept of Beeler, cloak whipping. Sleep held the city. He opened his palm. The pin glimmered. He pressed its sharp clasp into his flesh, marking skin that could change but still feel pain. A life unpaid demanded another. He might kill the employer, kill the prey twice, or forfeit his own face to the god. Choice was illusion. Debt was truth. He rose, turned toward the east where the narrow sea shimmered. Beyond lay Bravos and judgment. Yet turning back lay the mockingbird, flightless for a while. But cunning, dangerous, owed. The game was not finished. It had only begun to circle. Done. End of part 1. Oanka. Wind slithered through the arrow slits of Mager's holdfast, stirring tapestries like phantom wings. Jaqen Har felt it brush his cheeks as he drifted between torchlit corridors, neither wholly present nor absent, counting the beats of his own pulse to gauge the depth of his failure. Dawn had broken hours earlier, yet there was no sun within these walls. Only sour smoke from pitch-soaked torches and the tense murmur of sworn swords, unsettled by rumors that the master of coin had nearly died in his bed. He wondered if the gods of Westeros, so proud and many-named, ever bargained among themselves the way the kindly man said the many-faced god did. If so, was there perhaps a god of second chances, arguing in some celestial market that a life spared today might be worth 2 tomorrow? Such thoughts meant nothing, yet they helped muffle the voice inside him repeating, "You failed. You failed. You failed," with each tread on the rushes. Somewhere ahead, a bell tolled. 3 slow peals, calling the gold cloaks to change their watch. He slipped behind a pillar as 4 new men in battered half-helms stomped past, grumbling about long nights and thin pay. When their footsteps faded, he exhaled. The castle was never truly silent. The Red Keep breathed like a great beast, click of plate, scuff of leather, hiss of iron on stone. Jaqen had made a study of that breathing for 6 days, drifting, listening, stitching together a tapestry of roots and routines until he knew which pantry workers gossiped at the doorway, which cellars lay unchecked for hours, which handmaid always pat the same arched window to watch seabirds. Pattern bred opportunity, and opportunity could pay a debt. He reached the top of a spiral stair, turned into a servants' gallery overlooking the small hall. Sunbeams lanced through high windows. Dust motes swirled like ash caught in a ray. Below, long trestle tables had been cleared after breakfast, save one where Lord Petyr Baelish sat wrapped in a sable cloak. Despite the warmth, 2 maesters fussed at his shoulder, unrolling linen, daubing his throat with some yellow salve that reeked of pine. From this height, Jaqen could not see the wound, but he remembered the slide of his blade against flesh. Faint scrape, then sudden resistance as Littlefinger twisted. So near. The sound haunted him more than Baelish's scream. Steel had sung of inevitability, only to break off on a discordant note. Now the failed song had rewritten the music of the castle. Extra guards stood at every arch. Candles flared in hallways where they had never burned before. Rooks perched on ramparts, drawn by the scent of spilled blood. Even Varys had begun wearing soft-soled shoes that made no sound, though everyone knew the spider preferred silence. Baelish waved the maesters away, chuckling at something he whispered to Sir Dantos. A perfect smile, only faintly strained. Jaqen marked the tremor beneath that charm. A flicker of eye to shadowed corners, a stiffness when he reached for his cup. Fear had settled in like a cold on the lungs. That fear could be coaxed, stretched, used to steer him into softer ground. Yet, simple murder no longer sufficed. The contract remained. Petyr Baelish must die. But the debt for failure required equal payment. Traditionally, a faceless man offered up his own life or the one who thwarted him. Jaqen might have slit his wrists over a black bowl, let the priestesses strip the meat from his bones, but an urge stronger than fear clung to him. He wanted, perhaps even needed, to see the mockingbird choke on the debt it had forced him to owe. Above the lintel, a sparrow flitted, beating itself against a tall window until it found the seam and darted into free air. Jaqen watched, then turned and melted back along the gallery. A new scheme had begun to weave itself. A death within a death, layered like braids of silk. Littlefinger trusted almost no one, but he trusted the invisible rules of coin, credit, reputation. And he trusted chaos most of all. Chaos could be grown like a seed, nourished with whispers, watered by coincidence. He abandoned the holdfast by a narrow stair. Beneath a cracked gargoyle head, he slipped into a forgotten shaft that emptied behind the rookery. Few knew it existed. Builders had bricked most of the passage after Mager's purge, fearing assassins. Jaqen ducked broken masonry, emerged on the hillside beyond the keep wall with dust in his beard and sunlight warming his shoulders. King's Landing sprawled below, a sea of red-tiled roofs and crooked chimneys. To the north, the Street of Flower pulsed with midday traffic. To the south, masts forested the harbor. He descended narrow steps cut in rock. Halfway down, he passed a hooded figure leaning on the parapet, watching gulls dive for garbage. The stranger's cloak bore the gold chain of a master armorer. His hair was snow white, eyes sharp. As Jackin passed, the stranger murmured, "Life is a forge. Some blades are quenched, some shatter." Jackin did not break stride but replied in Provosi, "And some are reforged." The stranger's laughter followed him, low, knowing. The face was not one he recognized, yet something about the set of the shoulders made Jackin think of the kindly man's tales. Old apprentices traveling in disguise to test the faithful. Perhaps the House of Black and White had sent a watcher, or perhaps it was pure chance. In this city, one never knew. He kept walking until the stranger vanished behind shadows, then slipped into the tangle of alleys at the hill of Rainey's base. Fleabottom greeted him with its usual perfume of refuse, spilled ale, ash, and humanity. Children darted past clutching crusts. Dogs fought over a rat the size of a cat. A vendor sold eel pies baked with sawdust crust. Jackin mingled, buying a cup of wine so sour it puckered his lips. He found the narrow door of Rusk the ragman, and knocked twice. Pause, twice. Inside, the shop stank of urine-soaked hides, but its upper room served as marketplace for information sharper than any skinning knife. Cutthroats, spies, and black market scribes drank watered beer around a scarred table. Rusk, a man with more chins than teeth, pried open a chest when he saw Jackin. "Letters new come off the Bravosi ship," he wheezed. "Sealed, unsealed, whatever your fancy." Jackin sifted until he found a parchment bearing Sir Loris Tyrell's waxed golden rose, addressed to Renly Baratheon. Perfect. He purchased it for 2 silver stags, and pocketed 3 unsealed letters from minor houses in debt. To Petter Baelish. Credits owed, threats implied, pleas for extension. With copies of Baelish's ledgers whirling in his head, he knew precisely which numbers to alter, which names to omit, which interest rates to falsify. That night, by guttering candlelight in a rented attic, he became a scribe of exquisite patience. He inked one 8-page ledger note detailing Baelish's diversion of crown funds to a Volantine banker, known for backing rebel causes. He penned a second letter, supposedly from Mathis Rowan, promising troops in exchange for Baelish's writ to cancel certain debts, all forged with flourishes of Baelish's distinctive hand, looped ascenders, razor-slim serifs, practiced until even Jackin could barely discern truth from counterfeit. He dusted the papers with ground walnut shell and left them to dry, listening to the city. Cats yowled, carts clattered, drunken songs rose and fell. By dawn he delivered the fake ledger through a scribe he had borrowed coin from earlier. By noon the letter lay upon Lord Stark's desk. He arranged for the Rowan letter to find its way to Sir Barristan's, knit via a messenger girl innocent of its freight. The Tyrell missive he left untouched, save to ensure Renly received it at the precise hour the other 2 documents erupted like wildfire. All he had to do was lean back and watch chaos grow teeth. 2 evenings later, Ned Stark crashed into the small council chamber, brandishing the ledger. His gray eyes smoldered as forged steel. "Lord Baelish, perhaps you can explain these figures," he growled, slamming parchment atop the table. Baelish's wounded neck flushed red. He picked up the papers, scanned them, frowning. "I fear some quill pusher has indulged in fantasies. These are forgeries." "Forged by whom?" Ned pressed. Grand Maester Pycelle leaned forward, joints creaking, to squint at the numbers. Renly Baratheon lounged, but his gaze sharpened. Very smiled like a gracious shade. Baelish tapped the columns. "Here, see, the margins are off. My clerk Gavin always aligns the totals thus." Ned cut him off. "We will verify with Gavin then." But Gavin, loyal, frightened, was halfway to Rosby with his family thanks to a whispered warning Jackin had arranged. The clerk's flight would appear guilt. Pycelle harumphed, declaring the flight suspicious. Renly murmured about royal coin flowing to private pockets. Soon voices rose. Baelish's protests splintered against a tide of insinuations. Jaqen watched from the shadow of a doorframe. He had cleaned himself into a household guard's livery. Heavy blue cloak, split-tongue emblem of House Massey. To eyes that noticed, he was a tired man with crooked nose and an old dog bite scar on his cheek. No one noticed. He savored Baelish's quickened breathing, the slight tremor when he lifted his cup. Later, chaos rippled outward. Ser Barristan brought the Rowan letter to the king, who was too drunk to read but sober enough to rage that Baelish thought to buy half of Goldengrove with promises. Baelish defended himself with silk-tongued ease, yet the seed sprouted suspicion in Robert's fertile wrath. Varys visited Baelish after midnight. Jaqen listened at the roof verge while their voices dueled, Baelish accusing the spider, Varys disclaiming, hinting at conspiracy. The air thickened with distrust. Walls cracked. Under such strain a mockingbird's perch might break. 3 more days passed. Baelish doubled his guards. Candlelight burned in his windows till dawn as scribes pored over ledgers to prove his innocence. He still limped from the night of the blade. His wound had festered slightly despite Maester's salve. Tywin Lannister's cousin arrived with a force of household knights, ostensibly to discuss crown debt. Really to study Baelish's vulnerability for Cersei. Spiders spun, lions prowled, wolves bared fangs. Jaqen drifted through it all, invisible as humidity. Each dawn he scratched the mockingbird tattoo until it bled. Payment, reminder. He stole a jar of Manticore venom from a Carthene envoy's baggage, diluted it to stable potency, and hid it in a hollowed reed pen. He bribed a laundress to slip the pen among Baelish's writing tools. But fate, mischievous, had other ideas. A scowling scribe chose that very pen, pricked his thumb on the nib, and died foaming less than an hour later, collapsing across Baelish's parchments. Fear blossomed anew. Baelish ordered every inkpot inspected, every quill tested in turn on prisoners dragged from the dungeons. 4 nameless crooks perished, while jailers took wagers how quick each would twitch. The cruelty angered Jaqen in a distant way, yet also thrilled him. The mockingbird's cruelty made him uglier, softer, easier to destroy. On the 8th day since his failure, Jaqen disguised himself as a kettle-black sellsword to observe Baelish's clandestine meeting with Queen Cersei in the Maidenvault garden. Moonlight silvered Baelish's profile. A fresh bandage peeped from his collar. Cersei leaned close, golden hair spilling over green velvet. "If the wolf and the spider both seek your end, perhaps you should borrow the lion's claws," she purred, letting her gloved hand rest on Baelish's chest just above the wound. Baelish's laugh was a broken reed. "Your grace flatters me, but claws leave wounds that might never close. Better to bleed others than yourself," she replied. Jaqen was too far to hear the rest, but the shape of the shadows told a story. Baelish nodded thrice. Cersei raised 2 fingers as if enumerating promises. Their silhouettes merged briefly, parted. Lips met cheeks. It smelled of alliance. Alliance born of fear. Exactly what Jaqen intended. He left the garden, changed cloak with a passing drunk, and descended hidden steps to the bowels beneath the Tower of the Hand. Rats scuttered over discarded crossbow bolts. Cobwebs veiled a portcullis rusted half open. Behind it lay a secret passage Maegor had carved straight into the black cells, older than the castle. Jaqen tracked the stench of damp stone until he found the cell where the gold cloaks had thrown the dead scribe's apprentice, wrongly accused of forging ledgers. The boy sobbed in darkness, bruised and starving. Jaqen knelt, pressed a finger to trembling lips. He spoke softly of injustice, of secrets that could clear the boy's name, of letters the apprentice must write when freed. Jaqen swore Night's Watch vows to quiet the boy's terror, though vows meant nothing here. He left the lockpick hidden in stale bread. The next night, the apprentice escaped screaming his innocence. He was cut down by guards, but not before casting pages of seemingly genuine ledgers, prepared by Jaqen, into torchlight. The pages burned bright enough to scorch lingering doubts about Baelish. Now Robert raged openly. I'll have his head on a spike if he's stolen so much as a copper star from my coffers," he roared, startling courtiers. Cersei advised patience. Baelish might yet serve. Ned advised inquiry. Numbers must be proven false or true. Renly advised laughter. Why fret coin when wars were won by banners? Through it all, Jaqen drifted, stoking, fanning, until even Varys' calm began to crack. The spider hired Sellswords to guard his own chambers in case Baelish struck back. Yet Baelish did not strike. He shrank. He slept in the daylit council rooms, afraid of dark corridors. He ate nothing not tasted thrice. He trusted only Lysa Arryn's men, though they were leagues away. And each time he rose from a chair, stiffness crossed his neck and shoulder where the healing flesh pulled tight. The scar itched. He scratched it until blood seeped. Infection whispered. On the 14th night, Jaqen approached the house of the Red Hands in Fleabottom, an illegal apothecary run by a Lysine called Caldo. The man sold dream wine, moon tea, but also cheaper poisons cut with chalk. Jaqen traded a purse for a single thumb-length crystal vial of water-silvery essence. Widow's blood, some called it, though it slew men faster than women. A drop in wine? No taste but a faint floral note, paralyzed breathing. But Jaqen did not intend to dose Littlefinger. He intended Widow's blood for someone else. Debt for debt. A faceless man's failure required a soul equal in worth. Baelish's worth measured in chaos. Jaqen's new calculus measured another man whose death could finish the song Baelish had begun. Varys the spider. Remove the spider, chaos would swallow the castle. In that maelstrom, Baelish would fall by other hands even if Jaqen never lifted a blade. 2 debts, 1 stroke. He watched Varys for a day, noting mealtimes, visitors, when the eunuch dozed over secret letters. Varys favored honeyed wine from the free cities. He drank alone in his lavender-scented solar each dusk, reading coded scrolls. The flask came sealed with soft wax. Jaqen followed the page who fetched it, slipped a bribe into palm, offered to deliver a separate note to the master. He pressed Widow's blood through the cork with a hair-thin needle, wiped the droplet from the glass lip, resealed wax. Then he returned the flask to the boy with thanks. That evening he stationed himself on a roof, opposite the eunuch's apartments. Through a narrow casement, he watched Varys pour gold-brown wine, sip coup at some jest in a letter. The eunuch smacked his lips, sipped again, set the goblet down. Jaqen waited. A minute passed. Varys scratched his bald scalp. Another sip. He looked puzzled, fanning his face. He rose, unsteady. The cup clattered. He staggered, fingers at his throat. Eyes bulged. Widow's blood worked swiftly. Jaqen counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Varys' body convulsed, knocked candles flying. Flame licked curtains. The eunuch collapsed, silent. Jaqen exhaled slowly. The spider was no more. The god at least had 1 life. Yet as he turned to leave, alarm bells clanged below. Too soon. Footsteps hammered the corridor inside Varys' chambers. The door burst open. Sir Barristan, summoned perhaps by unseen instinct. He dragged Varys into the hall while a page stamped flames. Maesters came running. Jaqen's satisfaction curdled. The spider still breathed. Widow's blood rarely failed, but a too small dose could be purged by strong constitution and quick aid. And Barristan's honor was stubborn armor. Back in Fleabottom, Jaqen paced a cellar, cursing softly. 2 failures now? That path ended only one way. He lit no candle, sat in darkness, letting memories of bravos wash over him. The pool, the candles, the kindly voice promising visions of new faces, earned through perfect endings. He tested the edge of the thin stiletto he kept in his boot until blood beaded on his thumb. 1 clean strike through his own heart would expiate everything. Yet the image of the mockingbird's opal eye gleamed in his mind. To die without plucking that jewel felt hollow. He understood then that personal desire had crept into the god's work. He wanted Baelish to die not only for contract, but for what the man represented. The sneer of those who mocked life's value, who traded trust like coin. If Jaqen surrendered now, the mockingbird would swagger on, unmuzzled, wearing other people's pain like silken finery. That could not be. He rose, wiped blade on cloak, made pilgrimage to the Black Sept, an abandoned ruin outside the city wall, where silent sisters interred plague victims during the reign of Darren II. Bones still littered crypts, scraped bare by scavengers. Jaqen knelt among skulls, inhaling dust of generations, and prayed to the many-faced god for guidance. In the hush, a memory unfurled of the stranger on Mager's stairs. Some blades are reforged. Yes, reforged. The blade he must forge was his own resolve. It required tempering. Gather heat, plunge into coal. He would strike Littlefinger publicly, decisively, in a manner so spectacular, none would think to link it with earlier attempts. Better still, he would do it at the very moment Baelish fancied himself rising again. That would feed the god richly. Pieces slid into place. Tomorrow was the tourney feast in honor of the new hand, an affair Robert meant as apology to Ned for recent quarrels. Baelish had arranged much of the revelry. Mummers, masked dances, a lute troupe from Bravos, ironically enough. He would stand before nobles and commoners alike, displaying undiminished influence. There, within throng, a faceless man might be anyone. Lady, servant, dancer, guard. 100 faces offered themselves. Which held the proper edge? He chose the one Baelish would least suspect. The Sansa Stark he had brushed in the Maiden Vault gallery. Courier from Bravos had recently delivered gowns to the castle. Jaqen knew because he forged the inventory list. Among the silks was a dress of ash gray with pearls along the collar. Perfect echo of Winterfell snow. He acquired the gown easily, coins to a hung-over quartermaster, sigh at the unlucky misplacement. In a shed behind a stable, he tailored it roughly to his own frame, stuffed false curves, practiced Sansa's highborn glide, her timid half-smile. A scarf concealed Adam's apple. Scented oil in his hair masked the lingering odor of cellars. The result in a cracked mirror startled even him. A pale girl with shy eyes, fragile shoulders. No one would frisk Lady Sansa thoroughly, not with so many eyes upon her, not with the North's honor. And the feast hall would be crowded, candle smoke thick, musicians loud. A slim blade hidden within a fan could pierce a heart, sever an artery, draw little notice until too late. Then Jaqen could fade, gown discarded, a beggar boy fleeing through kitchens. He rehearsed Sansa's voice. Sweet, melodic, uncertain, until it became second nature. Darkness fell, torches blazed at every gate. Jaqen slipped into the Red Keep with the last surge of guests, gliding past startled guards who nodded, recognizing the daughter of Winterfell. No one thought to ask why she entered alone. They assumed a chaperone somewhere in the swirl. Inside, the throne room dazzled. Chandeliers dripped crystal, reflecting torchlight into 100 petals of gold. Perfume and roast boar scented the air. Nobles in masks of falcons. Hearts. Wyverns twirled across rush-strewn floors, while dwarfs juggled flaming batons. Robert clapped boisterously from his seat on the steps below the Iron Throne. Cersei smiled through clenched teeth. Ned Stark lingered near a column, eyes searching for his daughters. Jaqen bowed to him, heart twisting at the sudden guilt of deception. Ned smiled back, relieved. Baelish arrived fashionably late, draped in a cloak of midnight plush, scar gleaming faintly like a worm of red near his jawline. He worked the crowd like a doting host, offering quips, placing hands at elbows, orchestrating smiles. The music swelled. 2 jugglers tossed daggers near his head to amuse the king. Baelish bowed flamboyantly when Robert roared approval. Sweat dotted his brow, but he played confidence with flourish. Jaqen drifted closer. He fanned himself with painted silk, concealing the stiletto flattened along one rib of the fan. 5 steps more. Littlefinger turned, and gray-green eyes met his. Recognition sparkled. He thought he saw only Sansa. Sweet, gullible girl. He touched his chest in mock salute. Lady Stark, he purred, leaning slightly. Your beauty shames the southern roses. Jaqen curtsied, murmured thanks in Sansa's airy cadence. Baelish moved on, unaware death stalked inches behind. A minuet began. Couples formed lines. Jaqen slipped into place opposite Baelish, who winked. The dance commenced. Step, turn, hands lightly touching as partners passed. On fourth pass, Baelish's palm brushed Jaqen's. He felt the tremor beneath silk gloves. On seventh pass, partners draw close, bodies nearly touching. Jaqen pivoted, raised the fan, feigning to hide a blush. Within the fan the stiletto awaited. One flick, a thrust between ribs angled upward to puncture the heart's sac. Death, near instant. Music swelled. Jaqen inhaled. The moment crystallized. He struck. A hand seized his wrist. Ned Stark stood there, brows knitted. "Sansa, are you well?" The blade remained hidden, but the grip had faltered. Too late. Music carried dancers away. Jaqen curtsied again, words trembling. "Yes, father, forgive me. The heat." Ned nodded, squeezed her shoulder, guided her toward a window for air. Jaqen's pulse thundered. The blade returned to its sheath. Baelish drifted on. Opportunity lost. Yet the intervention opened a new path. Ned Stark had saved Baelish unwittingly. Ned Stark now linked to Jaqen's borrowed form. If Jaqen vanished, Sansa would be blamed. That could not be. He considered slitting Ned's throat too, but Norhern honor would unleash wolves. He excused himself to fresh air, slipped down a side stair, prayed none followed. Behind a curtain, he shed gown, mask, found breeches and jerkin stashed earlier. He limped through kitchens, nodding to cooks, a squire carrying wine. Outside moon rode high. He had neither paid debt nor kept contract. Worse, he had endangered an innocent girl's name. He returned to the Black Sept before dawn, climbed to the roof, and sat, legs dangling above a yard where weeds grew through cracked stones. He unrolled the fan, snapped the blade out, studied its length, finally hurled it into darkness. The dagger clanged on stones, vanished in grass. He breathed. Morning painted the bay in pearl hues. A single answer remained. He must face the kindly man, confess failure, accept whichever face the god demanded. He would bring Baelish's mockingbird pin as proof of effort. Maybe the priest would send another, better killer. The thought felt oddly comforting. He walked to the harbor and found a Bravo Sea cog raising sail. He bought passage with last coin, boarded just as the sun cleared rooftops. King's Landing shrank. On the wind he heard bells. Maybe some new scandal rang through the streets. He wondered, not without grim humor, whether Baelish would ever learn how close death had brushed. Halfway through the first day's sail, gulls circled. Jaqen sat on deck, polishing the mockingbird pin, when a cabin boy approached with a sealed letter. "For you, sir," the boy said, confused. No one aboard knew his name, yet the letter bore it. Jaqen Har, in Bravosi script. He broke the seal. Inside, a single sentence. Some blades are reforged only in fire. Below, a stylized sigil, 3 candles above a black pool. The kindly man's mark. Jaqen folded the letter, slipped pin into pouch, and rose. The ship pitched on swell. Bravos awaited. Fire awaited. In the forge of the house of black and white, he would be melted down, poured into a new mold. And one day, perhaps, a new blade bearing a new face would glide across the narrow sea, singing of debts finally paid. Oh, pain. The Bravosi cog sliced through the wine-dark sea, its triangular sails fat with eastern wind. For 3 days and nights, thin gray clouds roofed the world, muting sun and star alike, turning water and sky into twin sheets of beaten lead. Jaqen Har spent those days seated aft among coils of hemp, the mockingbird pin glimmering in his palm. He had polished it until each tiny feather caught what meager light the clouds allowed. Passing sailor joked that he must fancy the trinkets shine more than coin. Jaqen merely smiled, though his eyes never left the curve of opal that served for the bird's eye. Within that sliver of stone he saw twisting reflections. Faces he had worn, blades he had drawn, debts he had left hanging like rotting fruit. The cog's captain, a stocky woman named Selene, did not trouble him with questions. She let him eat in silence, sleep in silence, stare in silence. Sailors sense when a man's thoughts weigh as much as iron. They leave such men to themselves, lest the weight pass onto their own shoulders. On the fourth dawn, the clouds cracked open. Pale sunlight fanned across a sea grown suddenly green and inviting. The captain pointed toward a dark smudge ahead and announced they would reach the Sweet Sisters by sunset for fresh water. Jaqen thanked her with a polite nod, but unease stirred in his gut. Each league brought him nearer Bravos, nearer judgment. The kindly faces he remembered now seemed masks of stone. What would they show him this time? Pity? Disdain? Or the void-blank sympathy reserved for tools grown dull? He found himself counting seabirds. 1 black gull, 2 white terns, a brace of storm petrels skimming the waves. Old sailors claimed the many-faced god kept counsel with such birds. Jaqen did not know the truth of it, yet every fluttering wing felt like an omen. When a lone albatross wheeled overhead at midday, he fingered the mockingbird pin and thought, "A hunter wears another bird's feathers to lure prey." Sunset burned rose and umber over the Sweet Sisters. The cog anchored in a quiet cove where pine woods marched down to pebbled shore. Sailors rowed ashore with empty casks. Jaqen joined them, claiming he wished to stretch his legs. The beach smelled of resin and salt, a clean smell far gentler than King's Landing's reek. He wandered upland until trees swallowed the last orange threads of daylight. There, amid moss and deadfall, he knelt before a half-rotten log and buried the mockingbird pin. No ceremony, no whispered rite, just cold earth to swallow the metal. He covered it with pine needles, tamped them flat, and rose feeling lighter. Let the contract remain, let the debt remain, but let this lure stay where no hand could reach it. If the god demanded proof, the earth would testify. He returned to the ship empty-handed and slept dreamlessly for the first time in weeks. 3 days later, the cog eased into the lagoon of Bravos. Dawn mist curled like smoke around the marble fane of the Graces. The dark stripe of the Canal of Heroes shimmered between lanes of weather-worn statues. The Titan's hoarse iron voice boomed out a welcome that rattled the ship's timbers. Jaqen stood at the rail and let the sound wash through him. "Home," said the voice. Home, or at least the house where a man left his name behind. He disembarked alone, girded in plain gray, his dyed hair shorn to bristle length. Dock workers hurried past with crates of citrus and bolts of summer wool. No one spared him a glance. In Bravos, invisibility lived in plain sight. He took the long way through mazy alleys where laundry lines webbed between crooked houses. Children raced over footbridges, chasing a hoop. At a tanner's gate, he paused to watch 2 apprentices scraping hides. One cut himself. Blood spattered the water trough. Jaqen studied the droplets blooming like crimson roses, as though each were a message. Blood always blooms again. He reached the Isle of the Gods near dusk. Tourists thronged the canal-side shrines of the Green Grace and the Moonsinger. But few dared approach the House of Black and White. Its great doors of weirwood and ebony stood ajar, as ever. Jaqen stepped through. Candlelight flickered on statues. The stranger, the weeping lady, the lion of night, each one a face of the same silent god. The still black pool lay glassy beneath them, unbroken. Jaqen crossed the threshold and knelt, head bowed, hands resting open on thighs. Footsteps whispered behind. He did not raise his eyes until the kindly man spoke. A man left with a face and returns with none. Jaqen lifted his head. The kindly man's eyes were milky, but saw more than sight. A man failed, Jaqen answered. What price did the god receive? A scribe, a guard, an almost spider. The kindly man regarded him, and the mockingbird's feathers, buried on an isle of pine. Does the earth keep faith? It keeps secrets. Secrets are not payments, the priest murmured. Nor are almosts. The many-faced god deals only in completions. Jaqen swallowed. Then a life is owed. 2, perhaps. The kindly man corrected gently. One for the name promised, one for the failure. He studied Jacquin's face as though examining grain in wood. Yet a man returns, which means he chooses to pay. Some never do. I choose. Then rise. Jacquin obeyed. The kindly man beckoned down a torchlit corridor. They walked past alcoves where pale novices washed corpses, where masks hung like dreams upon pegs. They entered a circular chamber whose domed ceiling shimmered with starry mosaics. In the center stood a brazier glowing white-hot. Steel is tempered in flame. The kindly man said, "Faces too." He produced a small obsidian knife and held it out. A man must surrender his old flesh, that new may grow. Jacquin took the knife, understanding. He drew the blade across his left forearm. Shallow but firm. Blood welled, hissed as it dripped onto coals. The brazier flared green for an instant. Pain lanced, then dulled. He set the knife upon a silver tray. "Good," the priest said. "Now the pool." They returned to the hall. Jacquin knelt at the water's edge. The kindly man laid cool fingers upon his scalp, whispered words older than Bravos. Jacquin leaned forward until his face hovered a breath above the mirror-dark surface. For a heartbeat, his reflection stared back, sharp nose, hollow cheeks, indigo stubble. Then ripples erased him. "Drink," said the kindly man. Jacquin cupped water, drank. It tasted of copper and snow. When he straightened, his vision blurred. The statues seemed to pulse like heartbeats. The air smelled of cedar and dust. He felt skin shifting, muscles reknitting, as though invisible hands kneaded clay into new shapes. He did not fight the change. Pain became distance, like bells heard across water. When sensation settled, he stood, breathing hard. The kindly man gestured toward a polished bronze mirror. Jacquin approached and beheld an unfamiliar face, broad brow, weathered cheeks, iron gray hair clipped short, cold blue eyes. The visage of a Northman, perhaps, one who had seen too many winters. A face suited to cold debts, the priest said, and to the land where the mockingbird dwells. "Westeros again," Jacquin murmured. "If the debt remains there, so must its collector." Jacquin bowed. "What of a second life? The god has chosen. When the time comes, you will know the name." The priest pressed a folded parchment into his palm. No seal, no signature. Only a single name inked within. Jacquin did not open it. He felt its weight heavier than any blade. "Go with whispers," the kindly man finished, "and leave no echoes." Jacquin departed before dawn. By midday he had passage on a Pentoshi trader, bound for Duskendale. Autumn sank claws into the narrow sea. Gales flung spray over the trader's deck. Sailors lashed casks, cursed gods. Jacquin worked alongside them, hauling lines, patching sailcloth. Each night, he practiced his new voice, a low baritone with western burr. He practiced walking with a sailor's roll, practiced smiling with only one side of his mouth. Ace is more than flesh. It is habit. By the time gulls heralded Duskendale's cliffs, he had become Hroth Talveen, freelance merchant seaman seeking coin. Duskendale proved fractious. News of King Robert's fatal hunt had spread like wildfire. Rumors of Lannister plots, Stark treason, Baratheon bastards buzzed in every inn. Jacquin bought a rough cloak of black and green, slipped from tavern to tavern gleaning whispers. Pettier Baelish was no longer master of coin. Tyrion Lannister held the office under new boy King Joffrey, yet Baelish remained in council as Lord Paramount of the Trident, raised by royal decree after River Run declared for King Robb. Littlefinger had, some said, sailed east on secret mission. Others swore he lurked in the Eyrie courting Lady Lysa. All agreed he still wove threads invisibly. A contract on a man who slipped across faction lines like a silverfish across tide pools. More intricate than ever. Jacquin felt neither dread nor thrill, only a simmering calm. Some blades were reforged in fire. Now they must cut. He traveled by river schooner to Maidenpool, then on foot toward the Vale. Armies clogged the King's Road. Green Fork battles had stirred hornet nests. Supply wagons rattled. Wounded men groaned beneath sodden bandages. Hedge knights boasted at campfires. Jaqen kept apart, a silent shadow with a trader's satchel. At a crossing near Seven Streams, he joined a merchant convoy bearing fine wool to Gulltown. The leader, Master Byron, welcomed him after glimpsing the coin he carried. They spent 6 weeks winding through foothills choked with flaming autumn leaves. Bandits struck once. Jaqen's Northman voice boomed commands. Steel flashed. 3 bandits fell bleeding while others fled. Byron offered him a permanent guards post, but he declined. Friendship, though, he accepted. Friendship opens doors coin never will. Gulltown's harbor teemed with ships of every banner. Jaqen and Byron shared ale at the Silver Cobbler, where sailors bragged of Lannister victories and rumors that King Renly now besieged Storm's End. Amid the noise, Jaqen caught a softer thread. Petyr Baelish had been sighted en route to the Eyrie with half a dozen retainers. Another thread said he intended to wed Lady Lysa. Marriage would give him the Vales, Eyries, and Knights, an altitude few could assault. Byron grinned. First he was no one, now he may become the Vales' Lord Husband. Fortune favors cunning. Or damns it, Jaqen said quietly. Byron laughed, slapping table. You speak like a Braavosi priest. Jaqen only smiled. 2 dawns later he bribed a fisherman for passage across the bay. A bitter wind flensed the water's surface as their skiff tacked toward Witch Isle. Jagged rocks pierced waves like broken teeth. Beyond, mountain spires climbed into clouds. The fisherman let him off at a deserted jetty. Jaqen climbed goat paths until dusk, slept in a shepherd's hut, resumed before dawn. The eastern face of the Bloody Gate rose sheer and grim. Knights of the Waynwood line questioned him at spear point. He became Hroth the Wool Factor, bearing letters for Lady Lysa from Gulltown merchants. The Waynwoods, sympathetic to trade, allowed him pass. He trudged higher, lungs burning thin air. Snow dusted boulders, eagles screeched overhead. At Stone, the second fortress, news awaited. Lord Petyr Baelish rode ahead with Lady Lysa's party to Hart's home for a progress, expected back to the Eyrie within 10 days. Jaqen bowed away, concealed satisfaction. Hart's home sat lower, less defensible, with lakes and birch groves perfect for ambush. He descended on muleback along switchbacks, reached the valley floor. Frost silvered grasses. At dusk he found a half-abandoned inn where miners once drank before the silver veins died. Now only a deaf innkeep and his grown daughter remained, selling thin stew and watered wine. Jaqen paid for a corner room, mended his boots, listened. The daughter, Nella, garrulous from loneliness, spoke of Lord Baelish's caravan. 20 men-at-arms, 3 covered wagons, 2 septas for Lysa's son, Sweet Robin. They would skirt Lake Longleaf, camp one night near the ruins of Old Iron Holt before the Kingfisher Bridge crossing. Nella's cousin served among the drivers. Jaqen thanked her, tipped a silver stag. That night, he unrolled the priest's parchment. One name gleamed in candlelight beside Baelish's. Sir Lyn Corbray. Sir Lyn, famed for deadly skill, wielder of Lady Forlorn, a Valyrian seat sword. Also famed for mercurial temper, and rumored appetite for both coin and boys. He had fought beside Baelish in the Vale's brief conflict with House Royce, earning a fortune from Littlefinger's purse, but he valued coin above oath. Perhaps now, the god demanded his purse's owner pay equal weight in blood. 2 deaths. 1 caravan. Opportunity. Jaqen left at first light, cutting through woods parallel to the caravan's expected route. He moved like winter mist. Slow, deliberate, leaving no prints. Snowflakes began to fall, speckling pine needles. Near dusk, he crested a rise and glimpsed banners ahead. A mockingbird quartered with Arryn falcon. The party camped beside a cold stream. He watched from trees. Baelish laughed before the fire, cloak cinched, wound now a faint scar. Sir Lyn lounged apart, sharpening Lady Forlorn, silver black edge catching sparks. The men-at-arms posted double sentries. Septus warmed milk for the sickly Sweet Robin. Night deepened. Clouds shredded to reveal fat moon. Wolves howled, answered by uneasy horses. Jackin slid downhill, stepped over roots soundlessly. He carried no metal, save a single leaf-shaped knife forged of glassy dragon glass, a blade that left wounds, which neither stitched nor healed. He crept between wagons, a breath within alleys of canvas. The men-at-arms huddled near the big bonfire, cups clutched. Baelish retired early to a crimson pavilion embroidered with lace hawks. 2 guards outside, both drowsy. Jackin sprinkled poppy dust on coals earlier pilfered from Septa's satchel. Smoke lulled them, eyes drooping. He approached, heart a steady drum. 1 guard nodded off, chin on breastplate. The other fought sleep. Jackin touched his arm, murmured a question about latrines. While the guard's mouth-shaped answer, the dragon glass kissed his throat. A sigh, a soft gurgle, then nothing. Jackin lowered him gently. He slipped into pavilion. Baelish snored lightly on a feather bed. A lantern glowed low. Papers littered a camp desk. Treaties, investments, letters. On one parchment, he had begun drafting vows to Lady Lysa. Jackin stood over him, feeling neither haste nor hesitation. He raised the glass blade. Flames fluttered. Baelish shifted, eyes half opening. For an instant they stared at each other, mockingbird and winter wind. Recognition flared. Too late. Jackin drove the blade between ribs, angled into heart. The steel slid like sigh between lovers. Baelish gasped, mouth forming words that never found air. Blood pooled dark. The mockingbird's wings beat one last time. No shouts. Only wind rattling canvas. Jackin wiped blade on silk pillow, turned to leave. But a figure blocked the slit doorway. Sir Lyn Corbray, eyes bright as moonlit ice. He raised Lady Forlorn. "Assassin," he breathed, voice eager, as if the word were wine. Jackin lunged. Dragonglass met Valyrian steel. Sparks lit velvet shadows. Sir Lyn laughed, a wild sound. Their blades danced. Feint, parry, thrust. Corbray drove low. Jackin sidestepped, slashed thigh. Blood sprayed. Corbray hissed, backhanded, scored Jackin's shoulder. Pain burned. Tent poles trembled. Outside, horses screamed. Jackin circled, seeking opening. Corbray feinted left, struck right. Jackin dropped, sliced cap. Corbray staggered. Swung Lady Forlorn two-handed. Canvas ripped. Moonlight flooded. Jackin rolled clear as the sword cleaved bedding. He rose behind Sir Lyn, slammed hilt into skull. Corbray whirled, slicing air. Jackin ducked, plunged dragonglass into exposed armpit, up to hilt. The knight roared, backhand connecting with gauntlet. Jackin's jaw cracked. He spat blood, twisted blade deeper. Corbray's roar died to grunt. He collapsed onto Baelish's corpse, Lady Forlorn clinging free. Noise erupted, guards waking, shouts, steel scrapes. Jackin snatched Lady Forlorn, backslashed tent wall, burst into night. Men-at-arms saw shadow with shining sword and froze. Fear of Valyrian steel rooted them long enough for Jackin to vanish into birch shadows. Snow fell thick, muffling pursuit. Jackin ran until lungs burned, crossed icy stream, climbed ravine. Behind him, horns blew confusion. Dawn ached gray when he found a hollow beneath fallen elm. He bound wounds, drank meltwater, breathed. Contract fulfilled. Second name crossed. His own life remained forfeit still? Perhaps debt, balanced now. He drew the folded parchment, erased Sir Lyn's name silently. The god had collected. He thought of the mockingbird pin buried on sweet sisters. Bauble now robbed of master. Earth indeed keeps faith. 2 days he hid, watching patrols comb woods. On 3rd day, he donned clothes of a dead bandit found in ditch. Tattered cloak, rusted mail. He slid eastward, away from Vale Passes, toward the Three Sisters coast, traveling by night, feeding on roots and robbing squirrel snares. At Sisterton, he boarded an ore barge for White Harbor. Rumors there spoke of Robb Stark, crowned in River Run. Banners gathering at Moat Cailin. War spread like spilled ink. Jackin felt its tremors, but did not belong to any kingdom. In a White Harbor alley, he forged papers naming him Torquil Snow, guide for northern levies. He might have vanished north to melt into frozen wastes. Instead, he returned to Bravos once more. The debt paid, the blade cool. Yet nights aboard the galley home, his dreams filled with faces. Baelish's final stare, Corbre's manic grin, Ned Stark's concerned gaze upon a girl who was not his daughter. Jaqen woke, sweating, wondering if echoes had followed him despite his vows to leave none. Some blades cut both ways. The kindly man awaited in the candle hall. Jaqen knelt, placed Lady Forlorn across his palms, offered it to the pool. 2 names, 2 lives. The god is paid. The priest studied the Valyrian sword. The dark wave ripples in its steel. A precious offering, he said. The god accepts. Jaqen bowed lower. And what of the face a man wears? Keep it if he likes. Winter may come again. Jaqen breathed out. And the echoes? Echoes fade. Only the next note matters. The kindly man touched his shoulder. Does a man wish rest? For now, he thought of wolves marching, lions prowling, dragons dreaming far across narrow seas. But music always plays. Then sleep while the hall is quiet, the priest said, and turned away. Jaqen rose, slipping into shadows among the candlelight, where faces hung waiting, silent, patient, endless. Outside, Bravos bells chimed 6th hour. Within, the many-faced god kept count of lives, names, debts. For the moment, the ledger balanced.